I use this rod to catch fish ranging from 1 kilogram to over 100 kilograms. A marlin weighing over 100 kilograms. A tiger shark, well, it was about 4.5 meters long, definitely over a ton. Guys, this was my dream. It attacks the fleeing lure, trying to hit it from above or right here in the middle. Woohoo! Good little guy. Hey everyone, this is Mikhail Karpovich, a marine fishing expert with over 15 years of experience and more than 2,000 fishing trips in seas and oceans. I'll keep telling you in detail about how we specifically prepare our gear for fishing for yellowfin tuna. Today, we're going to talk about preparing gear for jigging. When we head out into the ocean looking for yellowfin tuna, the fish isn't always very active at the surface. So we need to prepare all the gear to get the best results from fishing, indeed. Of course, our jigging gear that we're about to prepare will also work not just for catching tuna. We caught both marlins and a huge amount of reef fish on them, but gradually, step by step, I'll talk about preparing the gear, what rods we use, what reels, and what lines. How do we use them when we're looking for tuna in the ocean and it's not active at the surface? That's when we try to catch it in the water column, even though the depth below us can be 1 kilometer or even 2 kilometers. It's usually around 400-500 meters. We drop the lures to the depth where the fish are. Usually it's from 0 meters to 100 meters. If it's not eating the lures at the surface, that's our cue, then we try to catch it vertically. We're heading out soon with our guests from the Pullman Hotel for some fishing. We've fully prepared the gear for casting fishing. We also prepare thoroughly for all our guests for all types of fishing. We're getting all the gear ready. Without exception, all our guests are important to us. And we always have positive results. We always get results. We only catch trophies. We never come back without fish. Come on, please, come on, hurry up, come on. Right now we're getting ready for the photo shoot. For Alexei, just like for many guests, this is the first trophy tuna of his life, and he was able to bring it up from start to finish with great dedication and effort under my meticulous and attentive guidance. Guys, only he can really talk about his feelings. But I can imagine what he went through. My son helped hold the rod because the pressure was just insane. The drag was really tight. The drag was so tight that you could hear that sound. A taut string, I think you heard it often. And when you keep hearing that sound, you always think, well, that's the line. E6. 80 pounds, which means a break strength of 40 kilograms. And we brought up this monster, which definitely weighs over 70 pounds. 120 pound fluorocarbon, 150 gram jig. It's already a bit battered. A small ring, 2 hooks on the assist, and it's just a fish weighing about 70 kilograms. So, well, let's start getting the gear ready for jigging. In principle, this is the most, I believe, effective fishing, even much more effective than trolling, and especially than casting. Because you can always find fish in the water column, you can always find them at the bottom. It doesn't matter if it's low tide or high tide. What's important is to find where the fish are sitting in the current at that moment, where they're feeding. Let's start with the strongest, and then I'll tell you about the weaker gear for smaller fish, which will be suitable for fishing with women and children. First, I use powerful rods for jigging. Weaker gear for smaller fish, which will be suitable for fishing with women and children. First, I use powerful rods for jigging. These classifications are 50 pounds. I found this company in Italy. This is the company Tolkana. My Turkish friends recommended their gear to me a long time ago as reliable stuff that doesn't break. I'll be honest, we've tried a lot. They have great rods for trolling, great rods for jigging, They produce everything themselves from start to finish, their own rods. And the carbon blanks and the handles, of course, besides the Fuji gear which they buy from the Japanese. This rod is 50 pounds, GT Tuna Special. What makes it good for me? First of all, it's about quality, and second, about price. Because Japanese gear is very expensive, they don't always handle everything that's possible. Not all fish with this rod catch fish from 1 kilogram up to over 100 kilograms. A marlin has already been caught on it, and a marlin weighing over 100 kilograms. The tiger shark was about 4.5 meters long, definitely over a ton. We caught a tiger shark. Once we caught a manta ray, well, size 2x2, an oceanic manta ray in the ocean. We thought we had caught a swordfish. After 2.5 hours of fighting and just the sound of those rings on the rod cracking, nothing broke, it just kept cracking. It was creaking, squeaking, and the line was ringing like a guitar string that's been pulled too tight. And when the manta ray finally surfaced after 2.5 hours, I locked the reel. It was creaking, squeaking. The line was ringing like a guitar string that's been pulled too tight. And when the manta ray finally surfaced after 2.5 hours, I locked the reel. By the way, this reel has a handy locking feature. I'll tell you a bit later. Well, we ended up breaking the line with that manta because there was no point in fighting with that two-person mattress in the water. It's like pulling a stick that weighs 200 kilograms and multiplying that 3 or 5. I talked about the rod. I'm completely satisfied. The average price is $450. That's a very competitive price for Japanese tackle, and it has proven itself just amazingly well. For those who know how to reel in fish, here's the Shimano Stella 2000, my favorite. It handles all the loads, performs well. I don't think there's much to say about it. Just Google what kind of reel it is, and it's well known and understood by everyone. But I think a less known reel is the Jigging Master. These guys, the Japanese, developed jigging reels a long time ago. This, as you can see, is a bait casting reel with a line guide. That's a really big plus. And the bait caster that faces down. So you want to put the Stella on this rod. You want to attach the bait caster, right? What's so good about it? The Japanese developed a high-tech reel that can handle the fight with manta rays, marlins, and tuna weighing up to 100 kilos, 100 kilograms, 100 kilograms, kilograms. And the tiger shark goes for it too, PE6 line. I think it's just a unique reel, the best in the world. Of course, it's more expensive than the Stella, the average price. They come with a right handle and a left handle, retrained to right-handed, but cast and jig left, reel right. Statistically 50-50. Choose reel wisely. Jigging Master Underhead PE5 for medium fish, handles larger but limited line capacity. I can say that statistically it's probably 50-50. For some reason people often come and reel with their right hand, even though they are right-handed. A lot of people use their left hand. So here you really need to understand what kind of reel you want. I use the Jigging Master Underhead, which is size PE5. This is for medium and not large fish. Of course it can handle large fish, but there's a limit to the line capacity. So for PE5 line, about 400 meters fits. PE6, it's around 350 meters. And for PE8, it practically goes in at about 300 meters. On a PE7 reel, you can easily fit 400 meters of PE6 line, and there's even a little bit of extra space left on the spool. For PE8 line, that's already in the medium range of 100, 1 or 10 lbs. It holds 350 meters. It comes out to 350 meters. I think that the optimal option is like a Stella. So for the Stella, 350 meters fits. And there's a little bit of space left on the spool. PE8 line goes in. And that's enough to tackle almost all types of trophies, get results. Let me tell you about the reels themselves. Look, what do we have in this reel? Lock that closes the reel so it doesn't unwind backwards. What's convenient about this, you open the drag, store the reel with the drag released. Your plates are resting. Then we got snagged on the corals. Again, we lock the reel right. Don't ruin the drag. We carefully pull the jig off under tension. Well, what can you do? These are frequent breaks in the ocean when there are corals, right? So there's also a ratchet in it. Here it is on top. So the reel works with the ratchet. Here, we open the lock. I've unlocked it. Now we close the drag. We can hear it, right? It's clicking in both directions. I don't use the ratchet. I don't think it's necessary. It slows down a bit when you cast the lure. It goes down. What are the nuances of using these reels? When you cast the lure, naturally, a spinning reel is better than anything else for casting the lure far. Here you drop straight down. Well, we basically fish vertically with jigging, and you hold the spool a bit with your finger to avoid tangles. So it's actually possible to get a tangle with this kind of reel. Here, you drop straight down. Well, we basically fish vertically with jigging, and you hold the spool a bit with your finger to avoid tangles. So it's basically possible to get a tangle with this kind of reel. The convenience, of course, is that there's a line layer. A huge plus, I think, is that the reel faces downwards. It's much easier to reel in the fish because when your bait caster is facing up, that's called overhead in English. So head is on top, right? And this is underhead from below. Here it is, underhead, overhead. And overhead bait casters are naturally cheaper because they're less advanced, less high-tech than these reels. On average, they're about twice as cheap. And overhead bait casters are naturally cheaper because they're less advanced than these reels. On average, they're about twice as cheap. I didn't finish saying the reel on P7, the price for the P7 reel ranges from $1,100 to $1,400. On average, the price is $1,200 to $1,300. It's somewhere between $1,100 and $1,400 with an average price of $1,200 to $1,300. On P, the fifth size fluctuates at 1.4 key. It's literally $100 cheaper. So the difference is small. They also have PE3 and there's PE10, but P10, guys, I don't see the point. This is already a mega brutal thing. So with this, we were able to catch everything we could. It's roughly the same weight as the Stella. And plus or minus, you see the size. Here it is like that. It's quite pleasant to the eye. The winding speed is 4 to 5.1, which I like. This means that it's a torque reel. I don't like any speeds at sea. In the sea, technique is important. You all do it with your hands and you get results. The main thing is to learn how to catch. Work with your hands. So, what are you working on with your hands? You work with the lure. You play it and stop. So you make the predator come out to attack. Well, I hope I covered everything about the reel. If you have any questions, just write. I'm explaining. Here we have the P7 Jigging Master Underhead Reel P5, right? Let's remember that on this reel, we spool it with P6 line 400 meters or P8 350 meters. I don't see any point winding P10 anymore. Well, unless you're going after some real monsters, but you can fit 300 meters on it, just keep that in mind. So we spool PE5 line here. If you want to fish at depth with a lighter setup, you can fit 400 meters. Well, of course, from a shallow depth, so PE8 will fit about 300 meters here, but that's pretty much maxed out. And I think P6 will fit about 350 meters. So I've talked about these reels. Here's our Stella, the same line along E8, along E10, along E8 it includes 350 meters, along 10, 330. Well, for PE8 you can actually spool up to 380, almost 400 meters, but I don't do that. Those who are good at reeling in fish can go for the Stellas and use them. Those who are good at reeling in fish can get themselves Stellas and use them. They're a bit cheaper than the Jigging Master reels. And use the Stellas. They're a bit cheaper than Jigging Master reels, but here's my recommendation. I love these reels, considering that we rent out our gear for 180 days out of the year, out of 365. Just imagine the load these setups can handle and how thoroughly they've been tested. By me as an expert, they have been tested on our guests, so this is quite valuable. It's a very serious experience. It's not just going out 2, 3, 4 times a year for sea fishing. So if you buy this gear, it will last you many years. Subtitles created by Dima Torzok. I want to talk about the gear we use for jigging for big fish. We've also prepared this. I use a 50 levy spinning rod. Well, these are my favorites for jigging. They don't break and are pretty reasonably priced. Italcana GT2 in the special model, jigging rods. Well, their length is about 175, 180. They can handle almost any fish, from small ones to the biggest sizes. We've caught a lot of tuna on them, weighing 50 to 60 kilograms. And we caught marlin over 100 kilograms on jigging, so they've already proven themselves with the gear. My favorite reels are these Jigging Masters. Underhead means when the reel is on top and the rod guides are on top. Not everyone finds it comfortable to fish. This is a high-tech reel, the most expensive in the world. It's definitely comfortable for her to fish because it hangs down. Here we have 400 meters of line, 180 pounds and 120 pounds of leader. It's specifically fluorocarbon. Why fluorocarbon? Because it's hard to cut through. Got it, sharks and their teeth will cut through everything. But we use them on the corals, marlins. Tuna won't be able to wear through those leaders either. You see, there are some scuffs here already, but this gear will still work. Yeah, before we move on to the lines, let me tell you a bit more about the rods. You can buy them for reels PE5, PE3, lightweight rods. Well, here I'm using Jigging Master, so pay attention. Even though they are lightweight and soft, they are quite strong. For example, this model is rated for 180 grams, and they claim it can handle a jig line of PE4, although I use PE6 and PE5. The blank test at a 90-degree angle is 11 kilograms, and at a 60-degree angle, it's 25 kilograms. This is basically the angle we test when reeling in fish, 25 kilograms. The rod is basically inexpensive. It's around $250, costs $300, so it's quite an affordable price, although there's no limit to the price with Jigging Master. They do exist, but those are already about $1,000 per rod. An important detail for me is the guides. If you're buying a lightweight rod, pay attention to the guides. All the guides should have 3 feet, then they last much longer. They're harder to knock off and harder to break. You see, they have 1, 2, 3. They have 3 feet on each guide. And of course, buy branded stuff. And check out the tests. If we're talking about lightweight rods, I recommend Jigging Master. This is a company I trust, and I these guys so much. They are just amazing. They make masterpiece tackle. I think they are some of the best in the world. So the lines, I like to use colored lines for jigging because usually the lines are sold in one color for 10 meters. So if you're fishing somewhere in the ocean, it's easy to measure a depth of 50 or 100 meters. If there's a kilometer or 2 of depth below you, then using a colored line is optimal because you understand at what depth you're catching fish. For example, we see tuna at 80 meters. I drop the jig down to 100 meters, that's 10 colors I unwind, and then I start reeling it up. And of course, we get results. Of course, you'll see how we catch it. If we don't catch a tuna with our guests from Pullman, then we'll drop straight down and catch a big one. I briefly talked about the lines. I love colored lines for jigging. I basically and absolutely love all the Japanese brands, especially. I don't really like Verivas lines because of the price. Well, forgive me, but the price is just outrageous, considering that the line is a consumable. No, guys, use WFT, strong colored lines. Awesome lines. The duelists are indeed cool. Daiwa also makes pretty good lines, to be honest. So there are a lot of options and choices. Let's move on. We're getting the gear ready for jigging. We have spinning rod, what for what, strong, weak, more powerful reels, lighter reels. Next we have the leader. Of course we tie the leaders. Knotters. I prefer Shimano. This is a light knotter and a heavier one. The heavier one is for heavier tackle. For example, you can use a light fluorocarbon of 80 lb and heavier tackle 120 lb and above. For jigging, I use fluorocarbon for the leader. The length of the leader is about 4 or 5 meters, just to be safe. Caught a marlin over 3 meters, over 100 kilos, it would have cut the line. We didn't measure it, but it was more than 100 kilograms of iron. And if it weren't for the 4-meter plus leash, he would have simply hit the cord somewhere with a normal blow from the tails and simply cut it off. And if it weren't for the fluorocarbon, keep in mind 100% fluorocarbon. A lot of brands produce it. How do you check this material? It's very easy to check. It's pretty rough and stiff. It's 5 times more expensive than shock leader. And the easiest way to check it is with a lighter. You see, it turns black and melts slowly, right? This is fluorocarbon. If it's a shock leader, it will just start to burn. I use shock leader more for casting. I don't use fluorocarbon. It's a stiff material. It doesn't cast well. Look, see what happens to it. See? It starts bubbling and it burns. And it smokes, you see? It starts bubbling and it burns. And it smokes, you see? Here, that doesn't happen with fluorocarbon. Here, it really bakes, slowly turns black and melts in the fire. And by itself, look, it's a very rough material. This is a soft material. Why use fluorocarbon for jigging? This is especially true for reef fishing because it's almost impossible to cut it on the corals the first time. There are different types of corals, but mostly somewhere a grouper might bite and go under the corals, and I've pulled grouper out from under the corals more than once. Second, even a bite, a wahoo, which cuts through instantly, if it hits the shock leader on a tooth, it cuts right away. With fluorocarbon, there can be little notches from bites, and then the hook gets set, and we reel in the fish. We reel it in and bring it on board. That's why I recommend fluorocarbon. The length of the leader is 4 to 5 meters. Next, they gave us 5 meters at night. I have a video on my channel about how to tie tackle for jigging and casting. You can take a look. Next, I'm tying the leader. I use hooks for jigging. Of course, with BKK, the price-quality ratio is just unbeatable. Whether it's treble hooks for casting, or single hooks on the assist for jigging. Here are these little hooks. Look at my hand. Here's the size. We've already pulled marlin with these little hooks. We've pulled tunas weighing up to 60 kilograms and a ton of different fish. And a bunch of barracudas there and groupers and everything you can think of. These are the assist hooks. Here's a smaller size. It may seem like a really tiny hook, just small, but it's strong. It was with these hooks that we pulled in tunas weighing 40, 50 kilograms. I always tie the tackle, ideally tying the ring to the leader. For sure, right? And like all the knots, have everything written down. Now I'll tell you about the jigging tackle, how we prepare it. I always tie to the ring. In the next step, I will be using a small metal snap ring. I'm putting the rings here and the jig. My favorite jigs are short and chubby. These 150-gram jigs have already caught an incredible amount of fish, starting from groupers weighing over 1 kilogram and all sorts of different fish, including Napoleons, barracudas, and wahoos, all the way up to tuna weighing 40, 60 kilograms, plus marlin. The same goes for this jig. So I put it through the ring, and I'll explain a little bit more about a technique, you see. What's the point of tying the lure this way? For example, the same marlin practically ripped the metal off this jig. The pulls were that powerful, right? The fluorocarbon material that we used was securely and carefully tied to the metallic ring, ensuring stability and effectiveness in its intended application. This is the method we have always used to tie it securely. Your tackle, as a result, ends up being as strong and reliable as possible. Why? Because your leash is tied to the ring, then the hooks sit in the fish. The jig hangs separately. If it flies off, flies away, breaks, tears, or something else happens, you have a fish on the hook. The most you have lost is your jig. But we kept the fish, brought it on board, and if we wanted, we could keep it for food. Or if we preferred, we could release it. So here's the setup I was talking about. For light spinning rods, I use fluorocarbon leaders of 60 to 80 pounds, depending on fish type. If we're talking about big fish, it's fluorocarbon of 100, 120, 130, or 150 pounds of the fish you want to catch. If we're talking about big fish, then it's fluorocarbon of 100, 120, 130, or 150 pounds. Sometimes even more. Here's another way to tie our tackle. Here's the second option. The same goes for the ring. On the snap ring, the assist hangs separately, provided that your snap ring is really a very good quality, which is hard to bend. But you see, my jig hangs separately. A very important nuance. Tropical fishing. Always have the hooks on top. If you're using only, for example, these huge jigs, such as the large ones, then we attach the hooks at the bottom on the snap ring and at the top, and so on. That's acceptable, but of course you'll get snagged more on reefs and corals. If you know there aren't too many snags, you can put on more hooks. But usually, the fish attacks the lure from above, meaning it hits here on the head and of course gets hooked on our hooks. Everything we have is on a jig for big fish. When it comes to big fish, such as tuna and marlin, we specifically use wide belts that sit on the hips, for example. If you have a narrow belt, everything will be a mess. Next, we use a pelvic belt. Before we used a belt behind the back, but it was really comfortable. It's exhausting and doesn't really help much. And ladder just stands up.
With this belt I can relax, the fish comes up.
Let's move on to jigs.
I love jigs. This fish gets tired. Lately I've really fallen in love with the 150 gram weight. 200 grams, a lightweight. We're fishing at depths from 30 meters up to 100. Of course, when it's a lightweight, so with that weight, you can fish down to about 70 meters. It's already getting heavy because there's a current, it's being carried away, and fishing becomes almost unreal from the depth. As for tuna, it works great, even down to 100 meters. I sink it down, and in deeper water, it easily takes that jig. So if we're going to deeper depths, we use, you see, this 400 gram jig. There are jigs that weigh 500, 600 grams, but mostly I use weights of 400, 250, and 300 grams. 250. There are also different types of weights like that. I use weights of 200 to 300 grams. For deep sea fish like black grouper and ruby snapper, use jigs 300 grams and up, like 350, 400, or 450 grams. If we're talking about catching deep sea fish like black grouper, ruby snapper, and other types of fish, then we use jigs weighing 300 grams and up, like 350, 400, or 450 grams. Here, the currents are pretty strong, 450 grams. There are pretty strong currents here, 450 grams. The currents here are pretty strong, and 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 there are currents here. We've just bought Minn Kota electric motors for our boats, the most expensive in the world, the best ones. They have a high power, 36 volt. We'll install them on our boats and make fishing at the reefs easier, both for casting and for jigging. So this motor is used like a sea anchor and the boat stays in place. And if we definitely discover the fish, we have even more success. We never come back without fish. As for our preparation for fishing for yellowfin tuna, I've already covered everything. We're ready. We just need to tie up some gear and check the leaders. And basically, we're about to head out fishing with our guests from the Pullman Hotel into the ocean for yellowfin tuna. We're also looking forward to jigging fishing with them inside the atoll. We have the deepest atoll in the Maldives. Here the depths reach 100 meters. We know great spots inside the atoll where the fish are just amazing. And it's in style, without any waves, without any rocking, with good results. There are a lot of GTs inside the atoll, small, weighing up to 15-20 kilo. There are a lot of big job fish, a strong fighter. Its attacks are fierce. It's a very interesting fish. We'll definitely show you how we catch it, and many other types of fish Coral groupers. This is the coral trout grouper. This is our coral trout, which we release and which we take to cook. I think this is one of the tastiest fish in the ocean. They're for steaming or grilling. So we're pretty much ready for our fishing trip. I also want to talk about assist hooks, as I mentioned before. I love BKK. If you're looking for a really budget option, you can buy single hooks. You can get a single assist line and also prepare it for fishing on a ring. I also love that Varivas has assist lines. Different thicknesses. This is the thickest here. The same goes for it. You can equip it with hooks, such as for jigging. For example, these are the big hooks I use for deep sea jigging or at depths of 50 meters and more. A single hook. I like a long leader, so it hangs down on the jig like this, right? Why do I like a long leader and a single strong hook? When a big fish attacks, it always opens its mouth and takes in water. So, when a fish attacks, it sucks in water along. With the bait is heavy and the hook goes in easily. Since it's light, it goes deep and hooks the fish really well. So, just like any fish feeds, it grabs a fry and the fry gets swept into its mouth along with the current. And here we have the hook being swept in with the current on a long assist. For example, the same tunas that we caught and will catch, we'll show you, well, the tuna there is big, like a jeep, it will just eat it completely. But usually the jig is heavy and it starts trying to shake it off. Then we see the fish hanging on the assist, but with such a short jig, it's actually a great option. I prefer, in any case, for the hook to be somewhere in the middle of the jig. But with such a short jig, it's actually a great option. I prefer, in any case, for the hook to be somewhere in the middle of the jig. Here it is ready on the assist, half or at the bottom. Here, for example, is a big jig. You see, it's also close to the middle. Here it will hang on our fluorocarbon leader, and it turns out that you could even see the fish attack, right? Judging by examining the teeth, it appears to be we had a wahoo here. This jig has already been used, so you can clearly see where the fish is attacking. Fish always attack a fleeing bait, trying to hit from above or right in the middle. From the tail, well, sometimes groupers bite. Well, we've prepared all our gear for jigging.
Just look at this beauty.
It's truly just a masterpiece.
Well, that's everything I had to say. Good day, everyone. We're going fishing tomorrow. We're getting ready for fishing with such a beautiful view. Look, a little beach, the sea surf, just beautiful.
Run, bullshark.
Damn! Damn!
What?
Wow. That was the most absolutely incredible and unbelievable dive.
Wow.
Smell!